We're at the end of the year. This is the last show of 2019. And it's a year that ends with a standoff, and that's not that surprising. Because if you remember, at this time last year, the U.S. government was shut down as President Trump clashed with Democrats over funding for a border wall, and that did not end until late January. Immigration, since then, has remained front and center. Amna co-moderated this month's Democratic presidential debate and had this exchange with Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana.
You said last month that the U.S. owes compensation to children separated from their families at the southern border. The consensus among child welfare experts is that those thousands of children will likely suffer lifelong trauma as a result of that separation. Are you committing, as president, to financial compensation for those thousands of children?
Yes, and they should have a fast track to citizenship, because what the United States did under this president to them was wrong, and we have a moral obligation to make right what was broken.
Amna, a year on from that immigration standoff, that shutdown, where are we? Where is the United States in terms of immigration policy? Where is President Trump?
You know, if there's one thing President Trump has succeeded in doing, it is raising immigration back to a top issue when it comes to American voters, even making it a voting issue around this identity issue and who we are as Americans, who should be allowed to become an American. And it hasn't been that way for many, many years. But where we are is dramatically far away from where we were when the Trump presidency began. The entire immigration landscape, not just when it comes to illegal immigration, but legal migration as well, has been changed. There's a number of changes still held up in the courts. And the conversation has changed dramatically, too. You see now, among the 2020 candidates on the Democratic side, people staking out much more progressive positions than they had in the past as a counterbalance to many of the Trump administration's policies. And the family separation policy, of course, that we've all talked about before, we've all covered in many different ways, that was one of sort of the deciding points of 2019 when people, even among the president's own supporters, when we knew the extent of it, when we knew the details about the ways in which it was carried out, about the complete lack of planning that went into separating minor children from their parents, that was for a lot of people a breaking point. It's not something as a policy matter that President Trump wants to come back to, but immigration remains something he comes to again and again when his back is up against the wall.
Can I ask, but how would you compensate people? Very good question to the mayor about that. And he said, oh yes, and then he slid off. And I mean, that smacks of, how do you administer that? How do you decide what, I mean,
and wait, a bigger question, where are the Democrats on immigration? How are they, if we look ahead to campaign 2020, where are they going to be on immigration?
So I'll say on that one specific policy, so far Mayor Buttigieg is the only one to go that far out to say, yes, we should be accountable to these families to whom we caused great harm, and compensation, financial compensation is the way I think that should go. No other candidate is saying that right now. But it's a very easy policy position and a very easy political messaging position for a lot of these candidates to say, what I will do is change these morally repugnant policies that the Trump administration has put into place. When you press them on the details, on things that should be easy, like providing a path to citizenship for DACA recipients, they will all pledge in the way that they have in the past to make it a priority. Democrats haven't managed to do that yet.
And there are other issues on the domestic front beyond immigration. You have the economy for so many people front and center as well. President's trying to get a trade deal done with China. Is that the key issue facing him on the economy in 2020, especially with the jobs numbers pretty strong and the stock market so high?
Yeah, I mean, the important part about the trade deal with China is that the tariff war was really harming a lot of people in a way that they could feel. It was harming farmers, it was harming manufacturing. There were real working people who were feeling the pinch from that. And that coming to a conclusion will be a big problem for him, because otherwise, that coming to a conclusion will be a bit benefit for him, because otherwise the economy has been really strong. I thought that the one thing that could be the biggest problem for Donald Trump's reelection prospects would be if the economy somehow tanked before the election. Now I'm not so sure. If it tanks for some reason other than what he does, I think that his core supporters may still stay with him, because they stayed with him longer than I expected them to, particularly farmers, throughout this China trade war. And they are there at the conclusion illusion. So I think the strong economy is the biggest win at the president's back right now.
Yes, and it's almost a hurricane, at least at the moment. And I'm trying to step back a little bit and think about this. And what have we got? We really have two Americas. And they are split on impeachment, they are split on Trump, they are split on immigration. I think there's an important split on health care. I think this idea of, Medicare for all, understand the force behind it, but there are 160 million people or more who have private insurance. And one of the old rules of management at the Washington Post was, don't try to fix it if it's not broken. And those people think it's not necessarily broken. They'd like it to be better.
But the other half of America feels like they want the whole system to change. You hear about systemic change from Senator Sanders, from Senator Warren. And that's gaining traction on the Democratic side.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I just think there is this sense right now of, is there going to be a crisis that defines Trump? If it's the economy, that hurricane at his back, you say and you're right, the Trump supporters stick with him, but I think there are lots of people who really don't like him who are sticking with him because of the economy.
What's your perspective, reporting-wise, when you're sitting on that debate stage, moderating, talking to them about health care? Do the Democrats, is there a debate in the Democratic Party about where they're moving on health care, and how do you see that playing out in the coming weeks?
Very much so. I mean, I think one of the most significant changes we saw in that debate within just the Democratic Party was, in the spectrum of, Medicare for all and changing the entire system, or slight changes to the system as it exists, building back up the Affordable Care Act first, was that Senator Warren herself shifted her position. And she went from wanting to immediately implement a Medicare for all plan early in a potential presidency to basically adopting the plan that some of the more moderate candidates had, which was a slow roll out to a single payer system in the first 3 years, and then eventually moving into a Medicare for all system, which can you imagine in your presidency, like your third or fourth year trying to do something like that. But it was a bit of a walk back for her from what was an incredibly progressive position. You're seeing that still very much play out. I don't think the Democratic candidates have figured out which way that the party needs to go.
I also wonder about nationalism. You look at President Trump's message in 2016 on issues like immigration. You look at the UK, Boris Johnson, the Conservatives winning over there just a few weeks ago. Is nationalism, President Trump's message on race, immigration, identity, is that again at the heart of his 2020 message?
Yes. I mean, look, everything that Donald Trump has done in terms of policy echoes what he said on the campaign trail. And there has been no reason to believe he would change that, because he really hasn't suffered any, aside from the impeachment, which is its own specific thing, really hasn't suffered any pushback to that. He really hasn't paid any political price for all those things. He thinks that that's what his supporters want by and large. He's right. And he is giving everyone the nationalistic part, he's given them that. Conservative judicial appointees, he's given them that. He is checking all of those boxes that he laid out during his campaign. And I don't see any reason that he thinks that he needs to change that. The Democrats will have to change their message in order to defeat it.
It sounds like you think he's going to be reelected.
I think, and it depends on the Democrats.
Yes.
I think all of the factors that led to Donald Trump's election are still there. The difference, the X factor, is going to be the Democratic candidate and how that candidate campaigns.
See, nationalism is a little fuzzy, I think. I think what it is, in the way Trump looks at it and practices it, is being tough, being a hard ass in almost every opportunity that comes his way. And that's very appealing to people in this. I think this is an era of, on the international front, great instability, great risks are being taken. It's not clear what the policies are, but there he is, and he can tweet anything. As you know, people who work for him wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat. My God, what has he tweeted? And if he's tweeted nothing, they can go back to sleep for 3 more hours, and then checked for the 6 a.m. tweet. I mean, it is tough, tough, tough. And I think it's, I was fascinated that you say he's been successful on immigration. You mean politically?
Absolutely.
In his eyes.
In his eyes,
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, you look back even to the 2018 midterm elections, what message did we hear from President Trump and the White House again and again and again? It was not just the economy's doing well, it was we need to fix immigration.